bringing you a kid-friendly radio show. Every Saturday afternoon on YouTube. Broadcasting live at 1 o'clock. Broadcasting live at 1 o'clock.
Hello and welcome to episode 56 of The Brit Show with me, Ethan. Coming up on today's show, part 1 of my interview with a poet who has had his poems listened to by over 100 million people. I said 100, yes I did. And performed on This Morning and at the Royal Albert Hall. But just before that, sorry this is a little bit late because on Saturday I was really busy, so I couldn't get it finished in time. But it's out now as well. And also in 2 weeks it is the 2-year anniversary of the show, so to celebrate that, next episode will be live. Yes, it'll be live. That means I can't edit any of my mistakes out. I'm gonna have to get my script right every single time. Yes, for the 2nd year running, we are celebrating the anniversary by doing a live show. So episode 57, the 2-year anniversary special, will be live on Sunday the 22nd of May at 1 PM at BST. We'll be looking back over the last 2 years, what we've achieved, what's changed for the show since the start, answering some of your questions about the show, and announcing some really exciting things that's coming for you. So make sure you don't miss it on Sunday the 22nd of May at 1 PM BST, live here on the Brit Show YouTube channel for the 2-year anniversary of the show. So now it is time for part 1 of my interview with the incredible poet Tomfoolery. Welcome on the show, a poet who has had his poems listened to tens of millions of people around the world. His poem, The Great Realization, being viewed by over 100 million people. And he wrote the poem Midnight Moment.
As Big Ben's chimes ring out around us, signaling a year that's new, raise a glass, turn up the volume and welcome 2022. And as we share this midnight moment and imagine all that's still to come, let's relish the magnificent things we achieved in 2021.
Which was performed on BBC One just after we welcomed in the new year. So how are you doing today?
Hey Ethan, I'm really good, man. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I gotta say, I was so when I received your message, I was so just pleased to receive it. I think the pandemic for me was a time where I tried as best I could to innovate. All of the things that you kindly brought up in that introduction were things that came out of nowhere for me in the pandemic. So I think I'm right that you started this podcast in the pandemic.
Yeah, I started it in May of 2020.
Okay, amazing. Okay, well, I started my channel in April of 2020. So both of us just decided, that we weren't gonna allow the difficulties of the moment to stop us from innovating. And yeah, dude, it's really cool to see. So thank you, man.
Thank you too. So if people don't know who you are, then tell them what you do. So basically, I went to university and graduated in 2016 and wanted to be a filmmaker. So I went to Manchester Uni. I left with 3 of my best friends from that period of time, and we started a film production company. And none of us had a clue about how to make films and sell them, but we'd always been playing around with cameras the whole time that we were at university. We were making our own little short films and music videos, but we had no formal education in this. We just were following a bit of a passion, and we spent 3 years making our first feature film after we graduated, and it was really, it was a labor of love, and it took a really long time and a lot of energy. And right after we finished the film,
because it was an independent film, we wanted to take it around film festivals all over the world and drum up some interest for it before attempting to sell it to distributors. And we were amidst our film festival run. We went to London, Edinburgh, Tallinn, Moscow. We won the Moscow Film Festival, and then the world closed. And that was really disheartening, you know, because we needed cinemas to be open. We needed film festivals to be taking place for us to continue with that ambition. So that was really disheartening. And at the same time, all of the rest of my family work in the NHS, so they were all very busy. And I've got a little brother and sister who were 6 at the time, and they needed me to homeschool them. So I moved back home, which is something I never thought I would do at the age of, I think I was 25 or 26 back then. And for about 2 weeks, I was just homeschooling them, waiting for everything to pass. And then I thought, right, I want to teach these guys about filmmaking, because we've got to fill the days, we've got to fill the time. And so I got my camera and a microphone and a light, and I was teaching them, you know, how to shoot things, but we needed something to shoot. And I have always loved writing poems. I've never pursued it as a job because if I'm being completely honest with you, I didn't know anyone that did that for a living, and I didn't even think it could be a living, you know, because I didn't know in what form that would take. But we needed something to film, so I would write poems about what was going on in the world, and those would be the videos that we made around the house. And the 4th video we made is the Great Realization, the one that you referenced, and it got shared around a lot, and lots of people watched it. And suddenly, overnight, it became my job to run this poetry channel, which I've been doing for the last 2 years. And I've been waiting you know, for the first 6 months I was like, this is going to come to an end any day now, and at least I'll have some fun while it lasts. And it hasn't stopped yet. So that's what I do now.
Yeah, wow. What a career so far. So let's go right back to the beginning. So what were you like at school?
Oh, school. At school, I went to a state school in South London. My primary school was a very nice school. You know, there were nice kids there. The teachers were nice. My secondary school was brand new, so it had no reputation. It had just been built, and there were only 2 years above me in the school ever, because we were the 3rd intake. So every year that passed, the school kind of filled up more and more.
Yeah.
So when I was in year 7, there was only 7, 8, and 9, you know, and it was quite rough. It was quite rough. And I remember very vividly getting to school. I'm 5'7", but I was really short at school. I was the small kid, and I remember getting to school and thinking it would be really easy for me to have a bad time here, because you know, I looked around and I saw kids getting quite you know, there were a lot of fights, and I didn't want that to happen to me. You know, so I became very interested in words, and I became really my goal was to be the funny kid, because I thought no one picks on the funny kid, no one messes with the funny kid. So it was really funny, man. When I was like 11, I became addicted to watching stand-up comedians do comedy specials. And I honestly, we had video VHSs back then, but no one uses them anymore. And some DVDs. But I used to find DVDs and VHSs of all the stand-up comedians I could, and I would just watch them. You know, I watched Eddie Murphy's Delirious, Chris Rock, you know, some newer guys that are emerging, Tom Segura, Joe Rogan, you know, Christina P, like all of these people that I thought were so funny and really good at navigating their way in the world by how quick-witted they were. And I thought that was really cool. I remember when I saw Dave Chappelle's Killing Me Softly special, which if you haven't seen, you've got to watch. It's like it's on YouTube. It's one of the most excellent stand-up comedy specials ever. So anyway, so I did this, and I was always like the class clown. I didn't you know, throw away GCSEs or my A levels or anything. I did work. I've always had the personality where I can work quite hard on things that I find really interesting, and things I don't find interesting. It's like pulling teeth, you know, it's really painful. Whereas my big sister, she's got a lot of discipline, so she could work hard at anything. Whereas for me, it was always the drama or English or history or politics. I like those, but the sciences and maths I found really tough to concentrate on. But yeah, I think I was a relatively fun-loving kid.
So, like, at that time, did you want to follow your idols and go into comedy then?
Well, I mean, I've gone through many things that I wanted to be, and at the time I was convinced I wanted to be that thing. So the first thing I thought I wanted to be was an actor, because I loved watching movies. So I really wanted to be an actor. I'm not that good at acting at all, but I really wanted to be an actor, man. And then during that period of time I told you about, in years 7, 8, and 9, I wanted to be a stand-up comic. And I'd practice jokes, and I'd practice telling funny stories, and not so much jokes like one-liners, but like stories that would make people laugh. That's what I liked. And then that storytelling kind of somehow turned into writing, because then I used to write all these stories down, and for a while I wanted to be a writer, and then I was still really in love with film, so I thought maybe a director or a filmmaker or something like this. I got to uni, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. Around the age of 17 or 16 or 17, I discovered that you could watch rap battles on YouTube, and that changed everything. We've got this league in, well, it's actually not as prevalent now, but there was this league in the UK called Don't Flop, and the Americans had Smack URL and the Canadians had King of the Dot. And they were the 3 YouTube channels that I honestly watched hundreds of hours of rap battles, because rap battles were even more interesting to me than stand-up comedy, because this was like confrontation, you know. And I told you before, like I'm not really much of a fighter, but in a rap battle, these are, you know, I do understand that, you know, there are problems in the world, there's confrontations that emerge, and I think it's so much cooler if you can solve things with words. I'm a big believer in free speech. I think that I think that the ability of human beings to say things to each other, even if they're not very nice, is really important, because I think that's how we solve things, and I think that's how we come to resolutions. And like everyone, I don't want people to say unkind things to each other, but I think it's better to solve your problems that way than by using your fists. So when I discovered rap battles, I was like, oh my goodness, here are people who are having real confrontation, and the winner is being determined by who's wittier, or who's got better rhythm, or who's got better wordplay. And I just thought that was everything. So for a while, I really would imagine that I had rap battles, even though I didn't, and I'd practice my bars, and I'd practice what I would say that would be really witty. I did that for a while, and then I got to university, and I wanted to see if there was any rap battle scene in Manchester Uni, and I couldn't find much. There was a guy called Shotty Horror from Manchester who was a really aggressive Mancunian rap battler. He was pretty interesting, but then there was a lot of people doing spoken word poetry. So I'd go to these spoken word poetry nights, and I thought it was like rap battling, but way less aggressive, much more personal, I guess. People talking about people expressing the way that they feel, which I think is really important. I do think sometimes spoken word poetry can be a bit indulgent, which is less my taste, but I also think, you know, live and let live, you know, let people express themselves however is most comfortable for them. So I would watch a lot of that, and then I just had this itch to get up and try it myself, you know, like with all the other things that I've just told you about. So that's what I do. So it was around university that I started writing spoken word poetry, but I didn't want to do it you know, in the I don't know if you've seen 21 Jump Street, but there's this great
No.
scene where Jonah Hill gets up on stage. It's filmed with Jonah Hill and Channing Tatum, and he gets up on stage and he's like making fun of spoken word poetry. He's like, slam poetry, Cynthia, and all this. And you got to see it on YouTube. It's really funny because he's really like taking the mick out of how spoken word poets talk. And I would always try and write my spoken word poetry so it sounded just like I was talking. I always didn't want it to sound like I was doing a poem. I wanted it to sound just like I'm talking to you now, but every time we get to the end of the line, it just so happens that it completes a rhyming couplet. I quite like that. And then yeah, as I told you, man, I left uni and kind of put poetry to one side for about 3 years. I just fell in love with filmmaking and making little movies. And then I really like got it back off the shelf when the pandemic hit, because I had all this time on my hands. So I thought, oh, you know, let's do a bit more of that. And as with anything in life, because success is anything is really hard to find, you know, like as a filmmaker, I was searching for success at filmmaking and all, you know, it feels like sometimes all the doors are closed in your face. And so with this poem that went viral, I just thought, for the first time in my life, I've made something and lots of people seem to be enjoying it. So let's do more, you know, let's do more of that, you know. So that's kind of where it all came from. A lot of it was accidents. Like most of the things that have happened in my life have just been accidents.
Yeah. So how do you manage to formulate like your words so they flow like so well? Because I could never do something like that.
Oh, honestly, man, I'm pretty sure you could.
Could I?
Yeah. If you were to ask me what my goal is whenever I write a poem, it's to not make it complicated. Like really, and I take that seriously. Like I try not to make it complicated. I try to not use words that like are purposefully difficult or impressive or maybe some people won't understand. You know, I love the thought that when I think of poetry, I think of it as an attempt to communicate a thought that you've worked on. Because when you're speaking, you're communicating a thought that you're almost having while you're saying it. You know, speech is very much like you're communicating in the moment. With poetry, I think of it as like communicating something that you've just worked on and you've polished. You know, like making it rhyme is just really taking that thought and like doing a bit of work to it to make it look nice, but it's still just an attempt to communicate something. And so my goal is not to, I hate the thought of doing a poem that's so complicated afterwards someone goes, what does that mean? You know, like I want you to know what it means. I want my 8-year-old brother and sister to know what it means. I want my 95-year-old grandmother to know what it means. And so don't get me wrong, I think there's real value in layering the point or the thought you're trying to make, and then things can mean different things to different people. But I don't like kind of showboating and trying to make things complicated for the sake of it. So actually, like the great realization, it's not the poem that's complicated. Like the rhymes are like do and you and me and we and plenty and 20. Like honestly, man, it's really basic stuff. But what can be complicated, where I do think you should invest time, is what are you trying to say? You know, what's the point that you're making? And the point I was trying to make with the great realization was, I thought that, you know, there was a lot of fear in the world. We didn't know how bad a pandemic was because we'd never lived through one. And I kind of thought that every time you turned on the news, you know, they were reporting how many people had died that day. And I thought that was quite bleak, probably necessary, but still quite bleak. And I thought that will be bad for people's mental health and for people's sense of hope and desire to persevere. And so the point of the great realization was, maybe we're going to get through this, and maybe we're going to come out the other end, and maybe when we do, things will be even better than they were before. And wouldn't that be nice? And that was really the thought of the poem. And it's a simple thought, but I think the reason it was complicated is because in a moment, I think if that poem came out today, it wouldn't do anything. Like, it wouldn't do anything. It'd be lucky to get 100 views. But in the moment, it resonated with, you know, the fear and the desire for optimism that I think a lot of people held. And so it worked in that respect. And but the poetry itself, like, honestly, all I try and do is communicate simply and gently, and I try and speak in a way that, like, people can follow and understand. But you do that too, man. You run a podcast.
Yeah. So do you think poetry is kind of going out of fashion, or do you think it is still listened to by people? But obviously your poem has shown that, because obviously it's had over 100 million views.
Yeah, dude, no, poetry, well, it depends what you mean. Rap is poetry.
Yeah,
you know, and rap's not going out of fashion. Like, you know, some of good arguments. I mean, pop music, that's all poetry. Like, you know, like every, you know, like poetry is, you know, poetry put to pop music is pop, or poetry put to rap music is rap, or poetry in silence is poetry, or, you know, like whatever. It's like, all it really is a means of telling stories. I think I was speaking to one of my history lecturers, and he seemed to I haven't read enough on ancient history, but it seems that humans developed to really enjoy hearing stories that rhymed, and the reason that happened was because we began not as a written tradition, but as an oral tradition. So stories were passed down through speech, through the telling of them. So people, you know, people would sit around and tell stories, and then, you know, someone would go off to maybe another town or another place in the world, another village, and they would retell the story, and that's how stories existed. Now, what they found was stories that rhymed were easier to remember. If your story you know, had rhyming words, then actually the pathway back to the end of each sentence was you know, was more attainable for the human memory. And so I think that we've developed to really enjoy receiving messages that way, because it's deep within us. You know, it's one of those deep loves that I really think people have. And so poetry is everywhere. What's interesting is whenever I go and speak in schools or stuff like this, which I try and do a fair bit, it's like whenever people ask me, who's your favorite poet, I think they expect you to say, like, oh, William Shakespeare or W.H. Auden or Edgar Allan Poe. And it's like, well, those people are pretty cool, and if you've got a historical interest, for their time, they were killing it. Like, it was amazing what they were doing in their time, and we can appreciate it now, just like you can appreciate an old movie, just like you can appreciate Citizen Kane, or, you know, you can appreciate The Great Escape, or whatever, you know, films that came out a long time ago. But nowadays, so whenever someone says, who's your favorite poet, I always want to be like Kendrick Lamar or Mac Miller or, you know, J. Cole. If you mean like actual like spoken word poet, like John Cooper Clarke is pretty cool. I went to see him in Manchester, and he's like wild. He's got this big, he's Mancunian. He's got this big, like, bushy black afro kind of thing and he always wears these sunglasses and really pale skin, and he just looks like a character. And he does all these poems about growing up in Manchester in quite a working class situation. And yeah, he's quite interesting. But in terms of like spoken word poetry, K Tempest is very famous and doing cool things. George the Poet is very famous and doing cool things, but it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And so I feel sorry for kids in school who kind of developed to believe that poetry is really, really boring because, you know, all they're ever given is a textbook full of, you know, a poet that they can't relate to. You know, I don't mean any disrespect to anyone, but if you only teach Simon Armitage, who's the poet laureate right now, and he was yeah, he's pretty cool as well, but like he's someone who I had to study in English literature, and that was poetry. And it's like, teach that by all means, but if you also show how complicated it is, you know, what Kanye West does, you know, or what Mac Miller does, if you show kids that that's actually the same thing and it's valid and it's valuable, and you know, if that sparks your interest, you could pursue a career in that, then I think not as many people would feel that you know, that the poetry was dead, because it's not dead, it's just got bad marketing.
Yeah. So you mentioned that link between poetry and music. So have you ever written any lyrics? Because I'm guessing you said it's very similar to poetry.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite poets ever is a guy called Leonard Cohen, and you could say that he's a musician, or you could say he's a poet. Same for Tom Waits. You could say he's a musician, or you could say he's a poet. And these guys are poets, but they've developed a musical sound that goes underneath their work, and you know, got a band together, and it's glorious, man. It's glorious. If you listen to the Leonard Cohen's last album, You Want It Darker, it's like, that is a trip into the underworld that is worth enjoying. And it's dark, but his lyrics are like so beautiful and so rich. I mean, my poems, I wouldn't really call them songs because I don't sing. I'm not blessed with the gift of a nice singing voice, but I never put out a poetry video without music underneath. I always put music underneath. When I've got more time, I've got this wonderful composer called Katie Phillips who composes. She composed the music for The Great Realization. When I've got time and I'm working on something quite hard, Katie will compose original music for it. But right now I'm doing this poem a day challenge, and it's too much for her to compose an original piece of music every day. So we have to use music from a stock music website, which kind of breaks my heart a little bit, because I love when things are original and composed and bespoke, even though, you know, the stock music, you can find some good stuff, but I always put music under my poems. I guess when I perform them live, often I don't, but I don't know, if I could end up someone like Leonard Cohen that had a band, because I also think music connects so much with people. I'm better with words than with harmonies. So yeah, if I could end up with a band going around doing poems that were put to music nicely, I'd be very content.
Yeah. So you now have quite a big following on your socials. So why did you decide to start the Tomfoolery brand and start posting online?
I've never really had personal social media. Like, I had a Facebook account and an Instagram account, that neither of which I ever used. Like, I had my friends from school on there, but I didn't really post anything ever. I was that person, you know, who never put up photos, never did a status, never did anything like that. Like, I've always been quite reserved when it comes to social media, and I've been quite like, not skeptical of it, but I think it's just people's temperament, you know. Like, I always wanted to go skateboarding with my friends, or go play some football, or go hang out, or go watch something, more than spending time online. Like, I've never, you know, I've got friends that are really good gamers, but my mum would never let me have a games console growing up. So I was only ever allowed to play like Xbox games or PlayStation games when I went to my friends' houses, who had FIFA and Call of Duty, and that's that kind of stuff. But I don't know, I think it's just the way my mum decided she was going to raise me, because I was never allowed those kind of things. And so yeah, I wasn't a big social media person at all. I watched a lot of YouTube, but I didn't really think I was going to create for YouTube or anything like this. But what's funny is, like, when I got out of university, I was doing poetry, but I didn't have any socials, and I would go to open mic nights in London or Manchester, and I'd do a show for a bunch of strangers in like a dingy pub or something. And afterwards, people would come up to me more and more, like all the time. People would come up to me and go, "Where can we follow you online?" And I'd always kind of blush and go, "Oh, like I don't really do that, but I'm just glad, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad you had a good night. Like, take care." And I was kind of happy with that. I was kind of happy with trying to be a filmmaker. That's what I wanted to be. And poetry was just like a nice live thing that I did for people. And then we had a pandemic, and suddenly I couldn't perform live for people anymore. And for the first time in my life, I was like, okay, okay, let's stop being so precious. Like, I've known for a while that the world is digital now, and if you don't embrace the digital world, you're just going to get left behind. And I pushed it as long as I think I could have pushed it, before eventually conceding, Tom, just grow up and make some accounts. So I've always, when I was at uni, I used to perform under the name Tomfoolery, because I actually, funnily enough, like, half the poems that I did at university were like really not like the poems that I do now. Like, now I do poems that are very family friendly for my little brother and sister and my grandparents, because I know that they're going to see them online. Whereas when I was at uni, like, it was like really risky. Like, there'd be stories about, rather more grown-up topics, let's say, and
Yeah.
trying to be funnier. But it just so happens that when I started the channel, so when I was performing at uni, I was called Tomfoolery. And so then the reason I did that is because I thought my name's Tom Roberts. I thought that was a really boring name to see on a poster. Do you want to go see Tom Roberts? Like, I just thought that was rubbish. And Tomfoolery I thought was fun because it kind of implies, someone's going to be messing around like a little bit, not take themselves too seriously. So anyway, so when I set up these channels, I decided to set them up under that name, and Tomfoolery was taken. And so my friend said to me, "Oh, you've got to go like official Tomfoolery, or Tomfoolery 1, or the real Tomfoolery, or whatever." And I just thought that sounded really silly, because I was like, there's nothing official about me. Like, I've got like 4 followers, and most of them are, my family. So like, how can I have an account that says @Tomfoolery official? So I thought it was really funny to make the channels @probably Tomfoolery, because in a world where, everyone's like, I am official, I am the real one, I like the thought of being like, it's probably him, it's probably the right one. So I set up these channels called Probably Tomfoolery, and yeah, honestly, like, I know it sounds maybe ungrateful or whatever, it's just the truth. Like, I never thought I want to be a Instagrammer or a YouTuber or a TikToker or whatever. Like, it wasn't really like that. I was mainly uploading them to the internet because I wanted to show them to people that I couldn't see anymore because we're in lockdown. So, I'd upload them and I'd send them around my friendship groups, and then honestly, like, the fourth upload we ever did just went berserk. And then suddenly I had to learn really quickly, like, okay, because it would be really foolish to squander an opportunity where hundreds of thousands of people want to hear your poems. And I thought, well, maybe this could be my job now, and that would be fun, because I've done a lot of like bartending jobs and call centers and things like that. And when you've been in a call center for a while, and then you've got the opportunity to do poems on the internet. It's like, yeah, the second one's better. It's more fun.
Yeah, so you touched your poem, The Great Realization, went absolutely viral in the first lockdown. And I read on your website it's now being seen over multiple social media sites over 100 million times. So, like, how is it to hear that number and just to think about that many people have heard your voice and heard your poetry?
If I'm being honest, man, you don't obviously, like, when you say it, you think, wow, that's pretty, that's a very big number. But it's hard, I think, for people to think of big numbers because they don't really mean anything. Like, big numbers are just numbers on a screen. That it's like hard to. If 100 million people were outside my house, I think I'd be like, okay, well, this is really like cause for concern. This is a lot of people. But when you say the number, it's kind of difficult to conceptualize. Actually, I get way less nervous thinking about that many people watching a video I made than I do performing in front of 100 people, you know? And if you're performing in front of 100 people, in front of you are 100 people and they've all got eyes and you feel like they're judging you and you feel like, oh, did they laugh? Did they not laugh? Whereas I made a video in my little brother and sister's bedroom and whacked it on the internet. I never really saw any of these people. Like, yes, they send my phone and my computer got like bombarded with messages for about 3 months after that video. It calmed down. It calmed down after that, and now it's not, you know, not difficult to manage at all. But in that period of time, the most overwhelming thing was the messages that you'd get, because, you know, you want to try and read the things that people are writing to you, but it was, you know, it was a lot. You know, I think there were about 10,000 unread messages in the inbox, and like, where do you start with this? And they're from people all you know, saying that they enjoyed the poem you made with your little brother and sister, and so that's very nice. And you know, you almost want to connect with people on a human level, so you read these messages and you can't help but think about, you know, someone will write, you know, hi, I'm in Canada and I was having a bad day and then I heard your poem and now I feel good. And this, you know, I find that lots of people were actually telling me what was going on in their lives, and then at the end just saying, but your poem made me feel a bit better. And I'd be like, oh, well, that's really, really nice. And when you get a message like that, it's really, really nice. And, you know, it's from crazy places. You know, one message would be from Canada, and then it would be from New Zealand, and then it would be from Iran. And you just think, God, the world is big, you know? And I don't know, I just like people. I think people are pretty interesting and cool, and everyone's got a story. And that's why when you sent me a message and I'm like, hey, you know, here's this 14-year-old kid, no disrespect, but I was not doing things like what you're doing when I was 14. Are you 14? Did I get that wrong?
13, but yeah.
You're 13. Okay, well, so when I was 13, I can tell you I was really, really unproductive, just interested in messing around with my friends. I mean, you were like, you sent me a message being like, hey man, I'm doing this thing. I've had was it Claudia Winkleman and Gabby Logan on or something?
Yeah.
And I just thought, how has he done this? This is amazing. It just, what's cool about your message is it just instantly made me think about what I was doing when I was 13. And I was watching when I was 13, I was watching compilations on YouTube, because YouTube had just like become a thing of, you know, people getting knocked over by animals, you know, and I was like, this guy's starting a podcast, like, that's awesome. And dude, if you keep it going, like, by the time you're like, I've lived your whole life 2 times. Like, I'm 27. So if you do this for another 13 years, like, you'll have the biggest you'll have the biggest podcast in the UK, you know, or the world. Like, you'll be bigger than Stephen Bartlett. And so it's like, good for you, bro. Like, that's really cool. So yeah, I just
Thank you. So we'll get back to the great realization. So did that poem go viral overnight, or did it take like a couple of days to get going?
So the poems that the first poem I posted on the first poem I posted got 50,000 views. And that was staggering to me because I didn't know 50,000 people. Maybe I know 500 to 1,000 people. So, you know, like maybe like when you take into account like your whole school, the people you met at university, whatever. So 50,000 people watched the first video, and I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. And then the second bit, and then of those 50,000 people, one of them worked for ITV News and messaged me saying, I saw your poem about the pandemic. I would love for you to write one for ITV News about clapping for the NHS. And I thought, that sounds awesome, because all my family work for the NHS. So the second poem was on ITV News during the pandemic, and that was very exciting. And I kept, like, every time I made one, I kept getting a cool thing kept happening. And nothing will help you continue doing something then a cool thing happens, because it's like, oh, you know, I did that, something cool happened, let's do another thing. So then I was kind of motivated to do it. By the third one, I was like, oh, you know, people watch these and these lead to opportunities. So let's try and make them good, at least, because the first two were like shoddy filmmaking and shoddy poetry, really. So then the third one, I remember thinking, okay, I'm really going to try with this one. And I tried to make it funnier. I tried to make the filming of it better and the sound quality better. And then by the fourth one, which was the great realization, I think that I was more like getting into the swing of filming myself and sound recording myself, because Kai and Sora, who are my 6-year-old brother and sister, were helping me. But when I say helping me, it was they're 6, so like they had a short attention span. So they would like stand next to the mic, and I go, "Does it sound good?" And they go, "Mm-hmm," and then they'd wander off, and I'd be like, and then I'd have to check it, you know. So anyway, so I posted that poem, and I hoped that, you know, something cool would happen. But I woke up the next day and I posted it at about 6 p.m. and just before I went to bed, it had 100,000 views, which was more than any of the first. It was more than any of the first 3. And so I thought, it's only been on the internet for like 6 hours, and it's gone ahead of all the others. So I thought, that's pretty cool. But it will probably slow down by morning. And then I woke up the next morning and it had just hit 1 million. And 1 million is just this big number where, you know, 1 million of anything, like, who wants to be a millionaire? It's like 1 million is a number that we all see as like, oh, okay, well, that's a pretty big number. And then I started getting emails and phone calls asking, you know, whether I'd go on This Morning and chat to Philip and Holly, or whether I'd go on the Today Show in New York, or the morning show in India, or the morning show in New Zealand, to talk about this viral video that was going around. And I said yes to absolutely everything. I didn't stop. I was like, yes. I'm not going to miss anything. Anyone that invited me on their podcast, I'd go talk to them. Anyone that wanted me on their news channel, I'd go speak to them. I didn't mind I don't want to make this politics, but like I lean more to the left. But I just thought I'll speak to anyone. So it doesn't matter if, you know, it's the Sun or the Guardian, if it's Fox News or CNN, like anyone that wants to speak to me, as long as I'm saying what I believe to be true and you know, and explain and answering their questions honestly, then I'll just talk to anyone. So I just said yes to everything, and that lasted for quite a while. And while all of that was going on, the video just kept going up and up. And then celebrities started sharing it. And when celebrities share things, then they're gonna kind of go crazy. I think the first person that I was really surprised by was Jake Gyllenhaal, who's a very famous actor.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And then it was like the cast of Friends, like Jennifer Aniston shared it, and then the Kardashian girls shared it, and then like these Bollywood stars in India shared it, and then suddenly it got massive in India, and I was like, okay, well, when is this gonna stop? And it genuinely lasted for months and months. It was really surreal when I think about it. And I've got to say, like, it made the period of lockdown fly by from my perspective, where I speak to some of my friends and they say it was a really, the days all felt the same and there was a lot of monotony, but didn't feel like that for me. For me, I was just like, whoa.
Yeah, you said about them television interviews and things like that. So, like, how were they going on some of the biggest TV shows all across the world? Like, how was that experience the first time you did it?
The very first one was this morning, and I was absolutely terrified. The one thing that I think was really unusual in my situation was, in normal times, if that had happened, you would have gone to the studio of all these places. So like the Today Show or whoever wants you to speak would have flown me out to New Zealand or flown me out to the US or flown me up. I would have stayed in a hotel. I would have gone into the studio. It would have been very starstruck. It would have been very exciting. I would have thought, wow, this is exciting. But all of it was from my bedroom. All of it was over Zoom. And so what was kind of surreal was it kind of, in a weird way, made it all feel not that real. It kind of like I was aware, like I'd be talking on, the morning show in New Zealand or Australia, and I've got family over there because I was born in New Zealand, and I'd get messages from my family afterwards being like, Tom, you were just on national TV over here, and I'd kind of go, yeah, but in my head I was like, yeah, but I'm in my bedroom, and it was really funny. There was one day where I think I did like 7 to 10 interviews on every continent of the planet Earth. So I did one in Asia, I did one in the Philippines, one in Europe, one in Australasia, one in the Americas, one in Africa, and that day it was my day to clean the bathroom in my house. And so after all these interviews, my dad handed me some rubber gloves and a scouring brush, and I was scrubbing the toilet. And I remember like having this really weird thought, and I was like, is this what it feels like to like make it? like you've spoken to millions of people today and you're scrubbing the toilet. And I just thought, it kind of made me laugh, I kind of thought, yeah, maybe this is a good way to not get carried away.
Yeah. So hopefully you enjoyed that interview. Part 2 will be out in a month's time on Sunday the 5th of June at 1 o'clock. So make sure you remember, because part 2 is probably better than part 1. But I do want to say a big thank you to Tom for taking time out of his day to talk to me. He is a great guy, so if you do want to check out more of Tom and his poems, the links to all of his socials are in the description down below, and I really do suggest checking him out. Sadly, that is all we have time for this week. We will be back on Sunday the 22nd of May at 1 PM with a live show celebrating 2 years of the British show. Please share this video with your friends and family, and comment and listen to last week's episode if you haven't already. Listen to this show until the end. Email me, follow me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe, because we are trying to get to 200 subscribers, and it really does mean a lot. In the meantime, if you have any suggestions to make the show better, or if you want a chance to come on the show, comment below, message me on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram, or email me at thebrickieshow@gmail.com. So that is all we have time for this week. We will be back on Sunday the 22nd of May at 1 p.m. with a live show for the 2-year anniversary. But for now, goodbye.
Bringing you a kid-friendly radio show every Saturday afternoon on YouTube. Broadcasting live at 1 o'clock. Broadcasting live at 1 o'clock.